Once I broke through all those barriers that were more internal, it ended up actually not only allowing me to start my business, but I also had better symptoms. My symptoms got better overnight. Like my body actually healed, my vision healed. And my optometrist was like, what happened over the weekend? Because I saw you last week. What happened? Like your vision's back to normal pretty much. I'm like, well, I went through this leadership development program. I was faced with all of my baggage, basically. I was shown the ways that I was showing up in the ways that I wouldn't be happy if things were over right now. If like this was it. The way I've been living my life these last 6 years, I've been playing small. You know?
Wow.
I've been holding back.
Welcome back to the Nichols and Dime Show. I'm your host, Chris Nichols. Today, my guest is Quentin Williams, who is a coach to focus on helping athletes transition from their athletic careers to their careers and lives beyond sports. His tagline is helping world-class athletes become world-class leaders in life, relationship, and business. I was really looking forward to this conversation because it's such a personal topic to me. Quentin and I played Division I NCAA sports, so we're able to relate on this topic and the struggles that come with unlinking your identity from the sport you played when you commit and invest so much into it. And this is such a common problem for athletes, really of all levels, who eventually have to move on, whether it's high school or college or professional. So we have some great back and forth about this topic and the common issues and challenges we've seen with athletes who have to eventually move on. But we, of course, talk about Quentin's background. He played football. He experienced issues with concussions, and he saw some long-term issues with guys around him with CTE. And this was a big motivator for him to go and contribute to help spread awareness to this problem, which ultimately hits the topic around men's mental health. It's getting better, but there still is a stigma that surrounds it. We then get into how he found his niche and then which led him to become a coach, and then what his business philosophy is, his structure of coaching, what he's learned as an entrepreneur, and some other really cool things that come up. This podcast is sponsored by Legacy Capsule, which is a video podcast as a service for a loved one in your family. Get a customized video recorded conversation with a professional podcaster so that you can let your loved one leave their legacy for your family to cherish forever. And now, please enjoy this episode with Quentin. Quentin, what's up, man?
What's going on, my Brian?
Dude, thanks for having me, man. What an exciting conversation for me. I'm stoked to get into this with you.
I'm pumped too, man. This is a topic near and dear to my heart, and know it is to you too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So just for context, so Q and I met, so Quentin Williams, we met through Jake Kaufman, who was a recent guest of mine. And it's been awesome to get to know you better. We took a really cool hike recently up there in Idlewild. And man, it's amazing when you meet good people who you haven't met yet and you're able to bond on some sort of experience like that. And then we can learn about each other and then go do a podcast. It's kind of the perfect way to progress a relationship.
Yeah, 100%, man. I feel like us as guys kind of bond through like doing hard shit. So
absolutely.
That was pretty hard. Pretty tough.
It was, dude. 7 miles or so. And then my fingers fell apart at the end.
We had a mixture of desert, forest, and snow. It was a little bit of everything.
Yeah, dude.
It's great.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to get into this with you. So we're up here at your spot in Encinitas, and you've got a really cool story, and your focus is around helping athletes transition into their careers if they're not going to maybe get into professional sports. Which is a big subject for a lot of people out there, for people like both you and me, right? And it's most athletes out there. There's really 1% or so that make it pro, right? And when you make it to, let's say, NCAA Division I, those guys are the top of their game, right? From where they came from. And so it's such a big topic, and I'm stoked to talk all about that with you today. But I do want to learn more about your background leading up to that. But just to start off with your punchline that you have on your Instagram, it says, helping world-class athletes become world-class leaders in life, relationship, and business. Can you just describe in your words what that means to you?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I call my business world-class, it's the LLC. I don't lead and talk about it a lot, but the inspiration behind world-class is that a lot of athletes feel world-class on the field or in the pool. But they don't tend to feel world-class off the court or off the field. And like, I'm really keen on helping us feel world-class. And ultimately what that comes down to is, who are you being?
Yeah.
How are you showing up? What's your attitude? What's your alignment with your purpose? And so when you choose to be world-class, in your own way, your own fashion, and really pursue excellence, you're gonna find that you're gonna be in alignment with the best things that are for your relationships, your career. It all spills out into all those areas. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we're going to be digging into that in detail, but I would like you to walk through how you got to where you are today. And you gave me some context about it, but you played football in college, right? That was a big focus of yours in your life.
Yeah.
And, you experienced some issues, right? Some health issues, concussion, which is common in football, as we know.
Yeah.
But it had some lasting effects that influenced your journey, it sounded like, going into your career, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you walk us through that story?
Yeah, totally, man. I left the practice field with the Chicago Bears. I had a tryout with them, thinking I was taking my helmet off pretty much for the last time. Pretty much knew that was going to be it. But what was cool was a few months earlier, I think I pretty much stumbled upon my purpose, the topic I really wanted to go after and really create a solution around. Because I was entrepreneurial minded. I really had a passion for, building something from scratch and being a part of something, being a part of a team.
Yeah.
I wanted to find that in my everyday life. And when I found out about the concussion crisis back in 2012, when I was a senior, I was actually learning about it in my master's program at the time. We spent a whole week on the legal troubles of the NFL and how CTE was kind of hidden from a lot of us for many years. And I'm like, this is kind of messed up. I haven't known about this. I'm playing Division I football right now in the Big Ten. Why don't I know about this? And I'm like, okay, I think I got my cause, right? I got my purpose, my why. And it just so happens that a few years later, as I'm actually working for a concussion startup, doing baseline testing for youth sports, working in that first job, I started having symptoms of post-concussion syndrome. I didn't know it at the time. I just had these random symptoms that I had never experienced as a player. No player knows what it's like to have a headache or feel nauseous after a workout like that. That was never my reality. So I'm like, what's going on? I feel really strange. I was lucky enough that Northwestern helped me, find my path, find the right, doctors and neuropsychs, spinal doctors, all kinds of stuff. And after about a year, I finally landed on the fact that I have post-concussion syndrome. So here I am. I've been wanting to solve this problem, and now I'm going through it.
Wow.
I'm experiencing the problem. So I'm like, okay. And then I had, a couple of guys that I played with in high school take their lives. And I'm like, this is getting way too close to home for me not to do something. Now, fast forward a few years, I actually left that startup and I was working in a comfortable 9-to-5 job. I was doing sales, account management, in tech sales. And I had thought that I would start a business. I was going to go and do my own thing. I was going to go build something that was going to help. Because no one was doing anything to help this problem. Guys were taking their lives left and right, shooting themselves in the chest and doing it in front of player facilities. And you saw Junior Seau, all these amazing dudes that when you research it more, you actually start to realize that there's more to this than just a head trauma thing. There's a lot more going on. Even the Aaron Hernandez story, as I researched that more, I'm like, yeah, I get it. We have symptoms, there's a lot of that's treatable. A lot of that, we can at least treat the symptoms. And there are actually some really cool things now that are coming out, 10 years later around psychedelics and power of meditation, mindfulness and all those things. And but at that time in my career, I didn't really have many answers for many guys. And I was like, I need to go find some answers for myself. And as I researched, it's interesting. I started finding a bunch of alternative stuff. And what made the biggest shift for me in my journey, in my recovery, was not all these therapies I was doing with, physical therapists to correct my eyesight and stuff. It was actually, it was me actually choosing a new path, actually truly taking responsibility for that new path, that building a business, actually putting my neck out there and building a business that's really intense on stopping the CTE problem, building something around this concussion thing. Because at that time, and even till now, it's such a taboo topic,
Yeah.
And as a as a people pleaser, in my past life, like the idea of bringing up this topic of CTE or talking about concussion, nobody wants to talk about that shit. Right.
Right.
Like, why bring it up if you don't have a really solid solution for these guys?
Yeah.
And, yeah, man. I mean, like that whole transition for me, you asked the question of like, what was my transition like out of sport into professional life? Like I had a very, unorthodox transition, right? I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I had this really unique topic I wanted to tackle that was very plexing and taboo. And it turned into this personal development journey. Because once I broke through all those barriers that were more internal, it ended up actually not only allowing me to start my business, but I also had better symptoms. My symptoms got better overnight. Like my body actually healed, my vision healed. And my optometrist was like, what happened over the weekend? Because I saw you last week. What happened? Like your vision's back to normal pretty much. I'm like, well, I went through this leadership development program. I was faced with all of my baggage, basically. I was shown the ways that I was showing up and the ways that I wouldn't be happy if things were over right now. If like this was it. The way I've been living my life these last 6 years, I've been playing small.
Wow.
I've been holding back. I've been playing not to lose, like a scared, little 7-year-old, right? But here I am. I was 27 at the time. Now I'm 34. And it's like, it's time to go, So yeah, it's like get back in the game, like turn the jets back on,
Wow, dude. What a good walkthrough.
Yeah.
You really hit everything there. And you said some things that stood out. And one of them was when you talk about the suicide problem from guys who experience CTE or they maybe they've had too many concussions in their athletic career. And you said you had a few friends. Did you notice that as a problem out there before it happened to your friends?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I had studied the Mike Websters of the world, right. Like, so I'm from Pittsburgh. Like I'm from the hometown of Mike Webster. Like that stuff happened in my backyard. UPMC is where, people were studying their brains sometimes and like, going to Mickey Collins at UPMC, like world renowned concussion doctor. And I'm like, yeah, I've known about this stuff for a while. And so it was already close to home. And then by the time, some of these former teammates, guys that I played against, and then I also played with on an all-star team, Adrian Robinson is a big name that comes to mind. Like he played for Harrisburg, played against him in the state finals. And then we got to play together in this all-star game called the Big 33. And I got to know him. I got to understand him. I got to see like how cool of a dude he was and how happy he was and also how talented he was. And then to see him go to Temple and then 2 years after spend 2 years in the NFL, even played for the Steelers. And then like to have him take his own life after retiring the NFL, like within a year or two, I was just so perplexed by that. I'm like, how can a guy that had, so many things going well for him, like what's really going on? And I mean, Adrian came from a very humble background. I think he had 1 or 2 kids at home to feed, right? And a lot of expectations, I'm sure, in his life, right? And so he lives, he grew up in a very different environment than I did. Yeah. Right. I grew up very privileged comparably, right? And so when you really dig into like what's going on there, there's a lot, right? So I wish I could have been there for Adrian. I wish these kinds of things would have been around, but they weren't talked about. They weren't around. No one was doing anything. Now you see it a little bit more,
right?
Like the men's mental health kind of thing is more of a topic.
Right.
We're more about that. But we still have a long way to go.
Yeah. So since you were aware of this being an issue out there, guys taking their lives for this reason, how did it affect you when this happened to guys that you actually had personal relationships with? Were you surprised, or were you like, oh no, this feels different because now it's happening to guys I know, but I know exactly why this happened?
I didn't know Adrian well enough to like know what was really going on in his life, what his transition was like, right? Like I've never spoken to his family and got like the lowdown, but I would say like sometimes like our families don't even really know. Like with guys, like we don't talk, right? And a lot of these guys, like it's interesting. Like most guys that take their own lives, just a general statistic, like they were in therapy, they were seeking help. And those are like the guys that, that actually were seeking help, right? Like there's a lot of guys that never even reach out. They never tell their parents. They never talk to their significant other or even a friend.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, right? Like, because you have this macho kind of like figure, we have this perception of who we're supposed to be as, you know, America's gladiators, basically. Right. So, vets, I think, face the same sort of perplexity on like, man, like I'm supposed to be this. If I'm not this, then I'm vulnerable and I'm, you know, so, I mean, I could see it from afar, but I didn't know what was going on in Adrian's life. I didn't talk to him regularly, you know, like, so it was close to home, but it wasn't like a best friend. It wasn't like, but I was starting to be like, well, I literally have one of my best friends played for the Steelers for 2 years as well. And he was just finishing up. I'm like, this could easily happen to any of my friends.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so how do I change that? How do I change the narrative? Yeah.
So to take that concept and, you know, I think it's a pretty general awareness these days that the men's mental health thing is picking up steam for good reason, right? And there's that culture around why guys have held it in for many years because that's the role of the man, right? Like you said, America's gladiators. I like that term. But to take that concept and specify it to CTE and concussions and these head injuries. And I just saw somewhat recently, I don't know, maybe last year, I think it was Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
He was on a podcast with Patrick Bet-David, which you might be familiar with him.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah. So that was a disaster of a podcast. And Antonio was just he was completely unhinged in that whole conversation. Patrick asked him about, was he worried about CTE? And Antonio lost it, right? So that was like a real life recent example of a current player who has been behaving kind of wildly, right? We could probably agree.
Yeah.
I guess my question is why? Is it more so because of that broader reason of why guys just don't like to talk about their feelings or mental health in general? Or is it more specific to this issue where they just don't want to accept that is the reality?
It's hard to say, man. Like it's never really one thing. You know, if there's anything I've learned in my journey, like it's never just one thing.
Yeah.
There's always, you know, I deal with emotions a lot, right? Like, so a lot of guys think like you can either just be experiencing anger, you know, like I'm pissed off right now, or it's just joy.
Yeah.
Right. When in reality, we have a whole spectrum of shit that's going on. Right. And so we can feel all kinds of stuff at once. There might be something that's stronger. So I would say the same thing when it comes to Antonio. I don't know Antonio, right? Like I don't know what's going on with him, but you know, to see what shifted after the Vontae's Perfect hit was clear, right? Like his personality absolutely shifted, and we've seen that, you know. But I don't know. It's a touchy subject because I'm not going to prescribe or diagnose what's going on there. And I think anyone who just kind of blanket, you know, stamps like CTE on him, I think is a little short-sighted.
Yeah.
Right. I think that everyone has their own pressures. Everyone has their own, you know, life experience. And, you know, if you compare and contrast a little bit to Aaron Hernandez's situation, I talk about this a lot. I used to talk about it a lot. It's funny. I get a lot of comments on TikTok. This is a bit of a polarizing topic. Yeah. Like Aaron Hernandez, you know, obviously killed. I think it was his girlfriend's brother. I want to say, pardon me if I'm getting my stats wrong, but, you know, watching that documentary, you see that like he had a lot of stuff going on that led up to that incident, right? That led to him and eventually going to jail. And of course, like, you know, losing his life in jail, but, he was sexually abused as a kid, that he never talked about that. Wow. Maybe he never even knew that it was a thing. Right. But that was a thing. And then he also held in that he was, you know, he was bisexual most of his life. Wow. And think of the pressure that it takes, you know, going into a all male locker room and the pressures around like when I played around the same time as Aaron, and you know, the use of those slurs around, you know, LGBT community, like it's gnarly, you know? I have teammates that, you know, the whole time we were playing in college, they knew since they were young, but they never came out. They never talked about it. And, you know, I just can't imagine what that's like, you know, to go your whole life kind of with this facade, with this mask. And, you know, that's really what we're talking about here is all the masks that we carry, that we build, these personas we have to build. We talk about like the ego that we develop. Sometimes it's a very healthy ego. We need to develop that ego, but sometimes it's protecting a wound, protecting an insecurity, protecting some part of us that doesn't feel you know, like we belong. And so we build up this persona, right? And I have my own story with that. You know, I think most guys that played sports, like, you know, it's a great tool to be socially accepted, to be pretty damn good at football. And you're respected, you're revered, no one's going to mess with you at the bar. You know? Like there's good things that come from that. Right. So, in many ways, I think I've seen it myself. Like it can be a protective mechanism, to avoid some of our traumas, to avoid some of the stuff that we've never known were really that bad, or like we're really like affecting us that bad until we give it up. Yeah. And when it's over or it's coming to an end, all these things come to a head in some ways. When we're actually forced to sit alone, sit with ourselves after football's over or after sports is done, it can be a very dark place. Yeah. Because now it's like, okay, now what? I think when people ask now what, there's a bigger question there. It's not just what am I going to do now? It's like, what do I do with all these feelings I have? Wow. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So that was a super, you know, roundabout answer to the Antonio Brown situation. But like, I'm obviously, you know, I'm sensitive to like his actions. Right. And I think a lot of his actions are very unacceptable, but I also have compassion for him. Right. Like I see him as a human being. He's not some kind of like idiot, you know? So there's a balance there.
Wow. Well said, man. Yeah. And yeah, I'm just letting that sink in. That was really well said. Everything you just touched on, because it is important to take that into consideration. We can look at the actions of these people and just make these judgments about them that are negative, like these guys who have ended up in jail or have done things that are out of line. But recognizing this issue that has not been talked about enough, and it's picked up steam more recently. Yeah. It's important.
This kind of relates to what we've talked about, you know, on the mountain actually, is like, you know, when someone doesn't prove as valuable to us anymore, you know, if they're like talking gibberish or, you know, they're kind of losing it, we kind of just discard them. And that's very similar to how we treat, you know, our ancestors, our elders, right? Like in this country, like it's like, you're good to me until you're not, you know, what can you do for me? Yeah. In this culture, you know, we live a couple hours from LA. That's what LA is kind of known for, you know? It's like, if you can't do anything for me, I don't want to talk to you. Right. Right. You can't help me excel, help me grow, help me capitalize. What value do I have? Yeah. And I mean, that's really at the heart of this work, right? It's coming back to, I have more value than just what I do. Yep. I have value by being who I am. And as a man, that's incredibly important because we're so used to being known and being valued for what we can do, what we can muscle. But society more and more is valuing us for what we like, the value we can bring, the capacity we can hold, the presence we can bring to a situation, right? That's true masculinity. It's a balanced approach. Wow. Right? It's not just like, can I go out on a battlefield and kill somebody, you know, or protect you? Can I provide for you? But can I be present with you? That's new masculinity. That's what, it's not really new. It's just like, we're coming back to that, you know? Cause I think we had a whole phase where we put these guys up on a pedestal that could, you know, be heroes. But sometimes the biggest hero is the dad that can be present with his kid. Yep. You know, who can talk through tough situations he's going through, you know? And also be that good parent at the same time. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's going to be, I think, a big topic when we dig into this transition, this crisis that a lot of these athletes deal with of moving out of their athletic identity I want to get back to that, but I just wanted to touch on something else you said earlier. And it was this leadership program you mentioned where you experienced this massive health evolution from your eyes not even working properly, from the concussions you've had, and then coming back to the doctor and asking you like, what happened? What miracle happened? Like, can you describe how you think that experience, so first tell us what that experience was in this leadership program that you went through, and why you think it had that change impact on you? Great
question, man. This is like, it sounds like so woo-woo or spiritual or some BS like that. And the thing is, one thing you got to know about me is like, as an athlete, you can probably relate to this. Like, I've always believed in mind over matter. Like, I just, there's never been a quit in me. I was the guy that was known for like playing full speed. And that's what got me my scholarships. That's what got me, big time accolades. That's why I was respected, because I played hard. I was going harder than anybody else. I had my own standard. I raised the bar, so to speak. Right. And so,
and for context, you were a defensive end?
Yeah, defensive end.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, sorry, I need to come back to your question.
The leadership, like the impact of the leadership experience.
Yeah. So I've always believed in that mind over matter component, right? I think more than most athletes do. Like, I played baseball as well for 2 years in college. So, I was drafted out of high school. Was very competitive in baseball.
Oh, wow.
And what's cool about baseball is like, they tell you that baseball is 90% mental. And I believe that. Like, I believe that with my soul. And so I think I brought that to the table when it came to football. Like, football is such a physical sport. If you put on 10 pounds of muscle, you can push 10 more pounds of person, right? Like, it's just kind of math, right? But I just never bought that, I saw like the shortest guy on the team at 165 in high school, absolutely crush these, D1 centers and guards, like on the D line. I'm like, I've seen shit happen, right? When you can will yourself into something, your body can do amazing things. And so that's always just been my core belief. And I get it if some people don't get that, but that's just me, And so here's the thing, like when it came to that leadership development program, basically what I was faced with, I can't talk about the exercises because they're just protected by the leadership training, which I really respect. Basically though, I was faced with kind of how I lived my life up to that day. It's a big ass mirror and feedback on like, how am I showing up in the world compared to how I think I'm showing up? And then if it was over right now, if my life was done, cause that shit happens. Right. Like any moment we could get hit by a car.
Tomorrow's never promised.
No. Never promised. Right. And so when you're faced with that, you live differently. They've shown that most psychedelic experiences are giving you a taste of what death is like. A really powerful psychedelic is Bufo, 5-MeO-DMT. And when you do that, it basically gives you an ego death. It has you experience what it's like to die.
Wow.
And, ayahuasca is kind of similar to that. Ibogaine is pretty similar to that. There's been some interesting studies around like how Ibogaine can actually help heal the brain and rewire the brain. Same with psilocybin and different medicinal mushrooms. So like what's cool about that is like what that's giving you is just it's giving you a flash forward into the future when you die. It's like, okay, this is a near death experience you're having. And when you have that, statistics show people tend to not be the same person when they step back into life. Because you have this different perspective. You're living like you're dying. Like one of my favorite Tim McGraw songs when I was a big country fan was "Live Like You're Dying," and it's just about like doing all the things you've always wanted to do. You live differently. You have the tough conversations. You tell the girl that I love you. You go skydiving for the first time. Like you live totally differently because you're living in the moment. You're not living in the past. You're not living in the future. You're like, no, like let's do what the day calls for, right?
Right.
And when you're living like you're dying or like you almost died, something switches on, man. And scientifically, what happened in that experience for me was you could argue it's the placebo effect. But, people think of the placebo effect and we don't actually think very critically about what the placebo effect actually is. Like every clinical study we've ever done for any drug has shown that if you give someone a sugar pill compared to the actual pill, you'll have like a strong percentage of people that will have the same impact from a sugar pill that the real pill was supposed to give them, because they think they're getting the medicine, but they're getting a sugar pill. So their mind and their body is turning on all the receptors, all the internal kind of pharmacy that we have within our body. Like we secrete DMT, the active molecule in ayahuasca. We create serotonin. We produce all of these things that we want to biohack our way into, or, you know, put in our body in a pill form. We create those. We literally have the power to create those. And so when you believe that you're getting something, or that maybe your life has changed, or that you are a different person, you're taking on a new identity, you walk away from that experience and you choose something new, you are changed on a cellular level. You are a new person. And that's what I mean by mind over matter. Mind really is matter at the end of the day.
Wow.
So what that is a psychosomatic connection. Scientifically, that's the psychosomatic connection, the mind-body connection that, you know, people have been studying, and people have known about this connection for years.
Yeah.
We just, as Westerners, have just kind of cut our head away from our body.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of think like the brain and then the body, it's all one thing, man. It's all like all the same thing. Our brain goes from up here down into our gut, into our heart. We have neurons in every kind of cell of our body almost, right? Like we are a living brain. So the mind and the body are, it's all one. So, yeah, that's what happened for me. And it was interesting going into my optometrist's office. He's a pretty progressive dude, like scientifically, and he gets this science. He gets the power of community, gets the power of feedback, the power of mental performance,
Sure.
how that impacts, you know, our bodies. And any good doctor knows that too, right? You understand white coat syndrome, right? Like you understand the impact that like a cold experience with a doctor can have.
Yeah.
Then you also understand the impact that a warm interaction with a doctor can have. It's going to increase his outcome, going to increase your patient's outcomes, right? So he actually understood it. He was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You're operating as a different person now, so of course you're going to have different eyes."
Wow. So to translate that, guys, you have the power to fix a whole lot just by using your brain.
Yeah.
Isn't that powerful? So incredible, man.
It's actually pretty scary for people to think about that.
Yeah.
Like, that's a paradigm shift that a lot of people aren't willing to accept.
Yeah.
Because if you were to believe that, if you were like actually believe that instead of just shrug it off or laugh it off,
Right.
like maybe some people are listening to this right now and they're like, like, okay,
Yeah.
cool, right?
Yeah.
Bro, I get it. It's scary to embody this belief. It's really scary because once you actually do, it's kind of like being red pilled. Like it is. It's like once you see the light, like you can't look away. Once you
Right.
know the truth that you have all this power in you, like you can't look away. And that can drive a man crazy.
Yeah.
When you know your potential and you can't live it, or you don't believe in yourself to live it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the athlete's life right there, and encapsulated is knowing they're meant for so much more, but they feel like they can't access it, right? Like
Right.
they just don't have the tools or the community or the playbook or the, you know, like they lost that structure. And they know it's in them though. Like they have that belief.
Yeah.
And that cognitive dissonance is like, where like, I know I could do it, but I'm just not experiencing it. That's what I think sends guys over the edge.
Yeah. It probably promotes discouragement if they're not fully bought into. It's faith. It's like the idea of faith, right? Wow.
Yeah. And hey man, like, I mean, to build on the CTE thing too, like it's just as easy to believe the opposite, you know, like I don't have any power over my body, my brain to reheal and rewire itself. I probably have CTE. I could easily embody that belief. I mean, I should be the one that says I have CTE. I use my head every single day to tackle people since I was 7 years old till I was 22. Like I'm the dude. I played defensive end against 330 pounders. I'm the dude, right?
Right.
There's many other guys that played in the NFL for longer, but like, I mean, I'm your classic case of it. And if I were to embody that belief and believe that CTE is in me and it's controlling my life and it's going to put me in the grave early, it's going to send me crazy. If I chose to believe that, then I mean, don't you think that would happen?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
The manifestation. Wow. Man, so that's incredible. But I want to understand how you found this calling to operate within the coaching space, focusing on this niche, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about this the other day, but was it coaching, the idea of becoming a coach that came first, or was it I want to help guys in this category, or I want to play a role in this industry, or I want to serve this problem. I want to help fix this problem.
Yeah. Quick little plug. There's this really cool thing called the Athlete Archetype Quiz that I have. So if you go to athletearchetype.com, you'll find this quiz. 10 questions long, takes less than 5 minutes, and it'll spit out your archetype that kind of represents your leadership style. Like, are you the guy who wants to have all the spotlight? Great. Are you the kind of guy who wants to have all the control?
Right.
Great. Be that guy. Are you the kind of guy who doesn't want any attention on him and just wants to do his job? You know, think of like the classic O lineman.
Sure.
Great. I'm the fourth category. I'm the one that kind of is like, I'm going to get in where I fit in. I'm going to figure out what's needed of me, and I'll be the jack of all trades. That's just kind of how I've always lived my life. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. But I just say, great, right? I'm going to take that. And so, you know, you can learn how to optimize these different leadership styles and capitalize on them. You can learn what to look out for with each of them, because there are things to look out for.
Right.
And how to navigate life and career beyond sport in your leadership style. What's your athlete archetype leadership style? So it's a cool tool. And it shows up in the way that I've shown up in my career, which is I saw a problem. I'm shaping myself to fill the need. Right. So it's like whatever's asked of me, I'm going to figure out a way to make this work. So you asked me if I became a coach and then I found a niche.
Right.
No, I found a niche, and then I realized I needed to somehow become a coach.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's usually the other way around, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Cause there was in many ways when I came out of sports, I could have done a lot of different things. I could have been a musician. I got a guitar back there. I want to be a fucking rock star. Like, you know, I could have done film. I really wanted to do like film production and editing. And like, I love documentaries and that stuff. Like, I could have done a lot of things, you know, but, I also kind of wanted to be a psychologist. I also really loved, and had a huge, awakening with going to a psychologist when I was young. My mom passed away when I was young, and my dad kind of just sent me to a therapist, and that therapist is one of my best friends to this day.
Wow.
He's a mentor of mine. Cause he kind of just showed me like, well, you know, he was just like he was a listening ear. He was someone to give me a little bit of confirmation that like, I'm not as crazy as maybe it's being made out to be. Right. And maybe we're all a little bit crazy, right? Like maybe we all got something, you know, that we're dealing with. And, you know, it was just a really healing moment in my life to have that, affirmation. And, that essentially is what I'm doing now. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. What I do is not therapy. It's much more action oriented and future focused than most therapy is. A good therapist can go backwards with you, and they can also go forwards.
Yeah.
Coaching specializes in focus in going forwards. Yeah.
That I'm glad you said that, because I do want to ask about that specifically. Like, what is your structure, your program? And before you answer that, who is your ideal client? Who is your audience? Could you just describe what types of guys you are here to help, and what is your goal to help them with?
Yeah. So ideal guy is a guy who's been out of sport, whether it's pro or college. He's been out for a few years. Guys don't really realize that they kind of like want support or could benefit from support until it's been a few years. Because you have this pendulum effect where it's like in sports, you have all this support. You have like your playbook, you have your schedule. I just talked to a pro soccer player 2 days ago. He's like, man, like in a year, I'm going to be retired. And I realize I'm handed a schedule every day, what I'm supposed to do. I have a meal plan, what I'm supposed to eat. Everything's taken care of, right? The training table's set up. Like, I don't have to cook. I don't have to worry about anything. And in the real world, we're not handed that. It's not set up for us. It's not a clear path to where I want to go, right? You know, playing the MLS is the goal for most soccer players. In real life, what's the goal?
Yes.
All of a sudden, I got to set my own goal. I got to set my own trajectory. I got to pick my own path and that can be really scary for a lot of guys without structure, without support, without perspective. If we do it on an island, that's where it can be a little scary.
Yeah.
I did that for years, man. I talk about it all the time. I was sitting in coffee shops every Saturday and Sunday, just like dreaming up this business plan and doing all the research I could on what it was going to be. And I felt like no one else in my circle was like doing that kind of stuff, you know? And so it was isolating. They were all out partying and I was in the coffee shop, you know, almost like a college professor or something like that, you know? So, does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. So the focus is on guys who have already gotten out of sports usually. Yeah.
Right? Sorry. So to answer your question, ideal guy is like a guy who's probably been out for a few years and kind of is realizing, that structure was kind of nice. I really enjoyed that. I missed that. I want the camaraderie. I want to be surrounded by guys. I haven't found that kind of connection in the real world, in this corporate space or whatever job I'm doing. Maybe I'm not even doing a job and I just need to get around people. So, the big focus of what I do is I get guys back into a bit of a group environment, you know, back in a team environment where they can grow and evolve and learn and continue to challenge themselves and push their limits in the real world. Yeah. So I get them in a community to do that.
So
of course I do coaching too. Like I do one-on-one because a lot of guys want that. They just want to work one-on-one. So that's something I do too. Yeah.
All right. So what do those each look like specifically? What is your approach to a new client, for example, who's in that exact position? Hey, I was playing basketball in college. I played Division I in college. I was really hoping to go pro, but I didn't make it. You know, I've accepted that. I know that now I got to transition into the corporate world and get a job, right? Which is most athletes, by the way, a massive majority of them.
Yeah.
What is your approach to this person in structuring some sort of game plan to help them move forward and create some sort of community, get their career moving? Those are just some examples I would imagine of what the goal is in you working with them.
Yeah.
So like, how does that specifically look from a structure perspective?
Yeah. You know, people ask me how I structure my programs all the time, actually. And like, they're like, for me, it comes very second nature to me. Like I've been through so many leadership development programs that like, I kind of know where you need to start, you know, like, but it makes sense. Tangibly, think about it like this. It's how I explain it. Imagine we have a map on the wall. Imagine though, you're just dropped in the middle of the desert or you're dropped in the middle of a forest. You don't know where you're at. You're just in this new territory. That's life beyond sports, right? You're in new territory. You don't know where you're at. You're not even sure where you are on the map, but you know, you actually have a map. You have a map with you. So great news. I have a map. I can figure out where am I? That's the first step, right? Figure out where am I? And then we can figure out where I want to go from here. Like what's the closest town? Where do I want to be,
right?
You know, in 10 years or in, 10 days, right? To get there. So I always start with like, figure out where you're at, look around, right? Get feedback as to like where you're at. So you start looking around for, different landmarks that are on the map that could be right around you, right? Like, oh, I'm by that spring, I'm by that tree, I'm by that mountain, right? So, okay, now I figure out where I'm at based on feedback, based on people's perspectives, and also me understanding who I am at the core. So many of us have our identity caught up in what people used to think of us, what our coaches thought, what our teammates thought. We've built up this persona, this identity around being an athlete. And a lot of us are stuck in that, right? So we can't bring that into the wilderness.
Right.
It's not going to serve us, right? So, we learn so much from that. And in many ways, it shapes who we are and our skills, but it's not who we are.
Right.
So we have to establish that. Figure out who the hell you are.
Right.
Right? What makes you tick? What lights you up? And then once you start to understand yourself better, right? That self-perspective, that self-assessment, you start to open up to some of the things that are tied to emotions, specifically things that you're angry about, things you're frustrated about. For me, my purpose and where I wanted to go on the map came from me knowing that stuff was going on in college sports and, with concussion, and no one was doing anything about it. I was pissed.
Yeah.
Right? So I turned that anger that I allowed myself to feel into purpose. So I believe we have, in order to figure out where we want to go on that map, we have to figure out, okay, what's meaningful to me, right? Like what would give me meaning? What problem do I want to solve? What team do I want to be on? Right. That helps you figure out where I want to go. And then, the third step of the program is figuring out, okay, how am I going to get there? Right. Like I can go there alone.
Yeah.
I could do that. Right. But there's, it's a lot easier and a lot more fun if I have someone with me.
Right.
And who can kind of show me the ropes, who's been along this path before, who's been through this wilderness and can show me around. So that's where, surrounding yourself with the right guys, with the right community, we've lost that, in our culture so much. Because once sports is over, it's like,
I'm on my own.
No one talks to one another anymore, No one calls up their buddy and says, hey man, I'm having a hard time. Can you help me out?
Yeah.
We have mentors in the corporate world, but not many of us are honest with them.
Right.
We have friends, but they're really drinking buddies. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like we don't have real deep connection until we get 10 beers deep.
Yeah.
So, right.
So true.
Which I mean that's a style, right? Like I'm not against that. I think that's fucking great. But could you maybe practice being more honest without alcohol? Could that be a way for you to practice this in your everyday life? Like when you don't need a substance like Topo Chico, So, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So a lot of what we do in these groups is like practice that emotional awareness. Like, okay, what's going on here? Can I get better at communicating that and be honest about things and be more authentic and vulnerable? Quote unquote. I hate using that word, but that's a lot of what it is. It's just authenticity. And so once you know who you are, you can authentically express it into the direction of where you're going. You can get support, you can get help. And it's only then that you can truly be world class, right? Because you're not going to be world class on your own.
Right.
Like none of us got to D1 or college level, like without help.
Right.
So why do we think we can be our best in real life without help?
Sure. Man. Well, and that's actually a great transition then to, I'm curious, what is the most common challenge you see in these guys and these athletes who are getting out of their sport, which they poured their lives into, their full commitment into, right? I mean, you and I did it. We both played Division I college NCAA sports. Yeah. And so that's why I started this podcast talking about how it's a personal topic to my heart. And granted, I had more of a realistic understanding. The sport I played, water polo, was not a sport with many professional opportunities, right? Yeah. Compared to baseball or basketball or football, especially in the United States. But it was still something that required my full commitment, and I had such a passion for it to an unhealthy level, right? And I struggled with an identity crisis at a point in college when I was playing, and I didn't believe I was playing up to my potential, or I just wasn't playing. I wasn't showing what I was capable of, and that ate me up, and it made me question who I was.
Yeah.
Right.
Sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I eventually exited out. I played for a few years in college and I stopped in college. It was mostly triggered because of a back injury and a herniated disc. And I had to take myself out, but I realized that I was just mentally not there with it anymore. It was not serving me. And at the same time, I realized, okay, I need to be taking advantage of this opportunity I have going to school in the Silicon Valley to explore where I can take my career, because this is a great place to be, to build a career, right?
Yeah.
So all those things made me come to that decision, which it was the right decision. It was a very mature decision. It took a lot for me to say, hey, I'm going to step out and I need to make this transition.
Yeah, you graduated, basically.
I
have a mentor that sometimes says, like, we need to know when to gracefully graduate from things.
Right.
And I think sometimes we put this word of quit, I'm a quitter,
right,
on the line. That's a slippery slope,
Yes.
I'm the kind of guy who doesn't have a lot of quit in me.
Yeah.
But
same.
I'm not going to quit on something that I'm actually aligned with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's different when it's no longer aligned, when it no longer serves who you're becoming.
Right.
Yeah. We have to know when that is and know when to graduate. Sounds like you did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm thankful for the way it played out. And water polo opened up so many opportunities for me. Of course, helped me go to the school I went to. It got me around the world. I met lifelong friends. But when I was playing sports at Santa Clara, I was close friends with a lot of the other guys in different sports. So I was close to the baseball team, close to the basketball guys, the soccer people, guys and girls. And so some of those other sports, they were much more, their whole path was much more controlled around their sport. Like I know a lot of those people, they were under this mindset throughout all of college where they were going to go play pro, like no matter what league it was in or what country it was in.
Yeah, I know those guys.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that was interesting because I was going through that transition of, okay, well, I'd like to go play pro water polo in Europe, right? Because I just, at one point, that's the role that sport played in my life.
Yeah.
Right. But then I grew and transformed into just a new mindset of where I'm going to take my life.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of those people who are still, they're often, I think I knew a guy who was playing pro soccer in Iceland, right? Or just these random places.
Yeah. I almost did the same thing.
Yeah.
I almost went and played in like Poland.
Wow.
I had to be like my own agent to figure that whole thing out. Because you have to figure out how to kind of speak. You have to speak these different languages, but there's a language barrier there. You have to figure out what site to go on to, but there are sites out there where you can find these teams. It's very confusing.
Right.
You know,
and good for them for living their lives. But I do think there's an insecurity underneath all that around who am I without this sport? I'm scared to transition out. I don't have the confidence to start something new. This is where I've gotten this is how people know me.
It's safe.
This is what I'm good at.
Yeah.
Right.
It's safe. I mean, from a psychological standpoint, like I hate using that word, but it's like, it's real. It's like, it's safe. It feels comfortable.
Right.
And, you know, you're still pushing yourself. Obviously, you're challenging yourself as an athlete to continue and grow. But, you know, what you're doing still feels safe. It feels like, okay, I can predict, you know, what practice is going to be at 7 a.m. tomorrow.
Right.
Like, it's predictable. So it feels safer to stay on that straight and narrow.
Yeah.
But
so is that the challenge though that you see most commonly? Because it was in my experience is seeing this identity crisis of connecting who you are to I am Chris the water polo player, or I am Quentin the football player.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, we also, it's not just like the identity. Like you'll often, of course, in my group program, I have everyone. Not to spoil it, but like if you ever take my group program, we'll introduce ourselves, and everyone will usually, because they're in a room full of athletes too, and they probably gave up within the last 5 years.
Okay,
they'll almost always lead with, "Oh, my name's Quentin. I'm a former 2-sport athlete in college. I played football and baseball. I currently, you know, work at Grubhub or whatever. I'm doing sales, and like this is my old life, right? Like, I'm really into mindfulness and yoga and blah blah blah, right? So we always start with the sport, right? Like we always start with who we are, right? We think that's who we are. We think what we do is who we are, and then I have to challenge them to remove sports from that introduction. So redo that and completely remove sports.
Oh, that's cool.
I don't want to just know what you do or what you did or all the achievements you had or what school you went to.
Yeah.
In this space, that shit doesn't matter.
Right. That's your whole goal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the goal of the first session, is to separate and say, like, you don't have to be that person.
Right.
Right. You can actually take off that mask that you built up. It's a beautiful mask. We're going to use it, but we're going to integrate it into where you're going next. Right. We're not going to rely on it as the thing that you are.
Right.
You know? So, I mean, a lot of that is caught up in like thinking that what we do is who we are.
Right.
And like, we really have that backwards, you know, in our culture. Like what we do is not who we are.
How do you measure someone's success with making progress towards disconnecting that identity part of it?
Their willingness to move forward. The readiness to actually move forward. Because you can't put a square peg in a round hole.
Right.
Right. If I still think I'm square, I'm not going to be able to go through that round hole.
Right.
That's probably the biggest thing, is like resistance to the process.
Yeah.
Resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Resistance to change. That's what it is really all about. Yeah. That'll show its head in a lot of different ways.
Right.
That'll show its head as like, I don't really care so much about this program. I was interested in it. I'm not really sure. Like, you'll kind of like lose commitment, lose buy-in, or maybe it's, they get a little turned off by something. Like resistance has so many ways of popping up, but at the end of the day, all of that is resistance to what you know you want. You're just scared to let go and pursue something new.
Right. Man, what a powerful topic. And I think people listening can relate to this, especially in our networks, right? Because we both know a lot of athletes.
Yeah.
And who are now in the business world some way or another. And on that transition, my podcast is focused on entrepreneurship. So I just want to quickly touch on that with what you're doing in your coaching business, helping these athletes transition on, getting that structure into their lives, finding their identity separated from what it used to be in perhaps an unhealthy way. I am the athlete, like you were just saying.
Yeah.
But I have a question I like to ask everybody, which is if you could pick an entrepreneurial life hack to share with the audience that is against the mainstream belief. So it could just be like a piece of advice. It could be a mentality. It could be a specific thing, but something that's unique to you. Do you have one that you could share?
It's a tough one, man. That's a really tough one. There's a lot of things that I say that I could say that people do say.
That's okay. If it overlaps.
Yeah. This actually goes perfectly in line with what we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
We resist what we are afraid of. Afraid of change, afraid of being exposed, afraid of success even, and what comes with success. And so, in entrepreneurship, I found myself resist even a little bit of what we're talking about today. I talked about how I resisted this career path for 6 years because I spent those 6 years in corporate.
Yeah.
And the hack is essentially that the fear is probably where you need to go. Like if you're fearing it, it probably has the most to teach you. It's probably going to meld you and shape you into the person that you've always been meant to be. It's going to force you to die to your cause and let go of your ego, let go of everything that you thought you were. It's the ultimate personal growth journey. So if you lean into your fears and lean into them head on, I think that that's where you have the best business success. And because you're probably pushing buttons, you're probably pushing, opening doors that kind of haven't been opened in a while and need a little bit of opening, So I think that's the noble path that is also tends to be the more lucrative path too, is lean into the doors that feel scary.
Oof. Love that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Well, what is your next big goal right now? What are you working on? Where do you want to take your business?
Yeah. So the thing I've done decently well for the last several years is I've kind of built wide. I've done a little bit of everything.
Right.
And I think like I've led retreats, I've led, 12-week programs, 6-week programs. I've done groups, I've done personal, one-on-one sessions, I've done team trainings. I'm going to get hired by a local high school, maybe some universities this year.
Sure.
But I think this is the year that I really kind of put it all together. I've put together, what I mean by together is actually get all those people in the same room. Like create that community, get that team back together, more than just like a pod of like 8 guys at a time going through a program, more like a real, like being a part of something, like wearing a brand on your chest, you know what I mean? And like, so I envision like a community, a brotherhood of former players that are all kind of warriors in their own right, moving forward in new ways and embodying greatness and world-class levels of excellence in their own way. And they're in this community to do that, right? To be a part of that and help each other. So that's really what I see. It's what I've always seen, but that's kind of what I've been afraid of is really building something that big.
Yeah.
So that's my next challenge, man. It's lean into that door.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see it happen. You got my support, and I'm sure a lot more people now with who are going to listen to this.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, cool, man. Who's one person in your network who you'd recommend I have on the Nichols and Dime show?
Entrepreneurship. There's quite a few. The first that came to mind is my friends Jess and Corey.
Okay.
They are breathwork experts. Corey's fascinating. He's a naturopathic doctor turned breathwork facilitator and coach and trainer. And then his girlfriend, soon to be wife eventually, like they got big plans this year. She has a yoga background, has been practicing breath work all of her life. And she's healed a lot of her like chronic seizures actually from breath work.
Wow.
It's fascinating. So
that's awesome.
They're a really cool couple, really fascinating, full of knowledge. Corey will drop some crazy breathwork knowledge on you. I often joke with Corey. I'm like, he like spits off all these crazy facts about how DMT is being secreted by our pineal gland when we're doing breath work. And I'm like, what if Corey's just making all this shit up? You know, like what if he's not even a doctor? He's just like some guy at a bar,
right?
You know?
That's good.
Because he says some shit that like you have a hard time believing.
Yeah.
So that's who I'd recommend. They have a cool business story too.
Nice.
They're great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'll follow up about getting in touch.
For sure. The healing couples. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll get you in touch with them.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Awesome conversation. What is your social media? How can people find you online?
Yeah. So Instagram's a great place. Q Williams with 2 underscores at the end. Apparently there's a lot of Q Williams out there. So, yeah. And then, LinkedIn's pretty good. My website is q-williams.com. I mentioned that quiz. That's a great way to kind of get introduced to my work and kind of learn more about yourself at the same time, get some tips, some immediate feedback, kind of the feedback we've been talking about all day.
Mm-hmm.
Go to athletearchetype.com to reach that quiz.
Okay. That'd be a good starting point to
for sure
start exploring this.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, Q, man, thanks so much, man, for being on the show. I love this conversation and can't wait to see your continued success and continue growing our friendship, man.
You too, man. This has been a lot of fun. Really glad we did it.
Absolutely.
All right, man.
All right. Bye, guys.
Yo.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Nichols and Dimes Show. Please hit the subscribe button on YouTube and follow my Instagram page at Nichols and Dimes. The podcast Instagram page is at Nichols and Dimes Show. And please like any of the videos you come across on either platform and leave a comment, leave feedback. It helps me to improve and innovate and to continue to scale and bring more interesting guests to the Nichols and Dimes Show. Thank you all for the support, and we'll see you next time.